Deepak Chopra. My man has perfected the art of deceiving people so well that today he's worth almost $150 million from just being a new age spiritualist and an alternative medicine promoter. And although he's been called out several times for his anti-science beliefs, and he's even publicly embarrassed himself several times in debates.
We have a consciousness that is part of the sea of consciousness.
You asked Dan what I meant by woo-woo. That is the very embodiment of woo-woo.
Even after all this, his net worth only keeps growing. All thanks to his ability to make people think that they're getting what they desire. So in today's video, we're gonna look at what he did to get where he is and learn what methods we can adopt to get rich ourselves. My name's Pranav, you're watching How to Deceive People on Science is Dope. Let's begin. Deepak Chopra was a qualified medical doctor who did his MD in endocrinology from India before emigrating to the US in 1970. He came from a long line of doctors. His father was a cardiologist for 25 years. His grandfather was an army doctor for the British. And even he had the experience of practicing as a medical doctor for 20 years before he decided to make the switch to alternative medicine. Now, why would a man like him, who understands the importance of evidence for medical claims, understands how clinical trials are the backbone of evidence-based medicine, and understands how rampant misinformation is among the public, the kind of misinformation that often adds a deadly delay in people getting proper medical care, or straight up turns people away from modern medicine? Why would a man like that make his own job as a doctor harder by adding to this pile of misinformation? I'll give you a few seconds to guess. The answer is he didn't. He completely gave up being a doctor, even gave up his doctor title. I'll tell you what was going on through his mind. There were 3 reasons. And you better be taking notes because we can learn a lot from the reasons he had. You should call modern medical professionals the cult of drug-pushing doctors. The average layman will love this, especially if they've had a bad experience with modern medicine or a doctor or a hospital. The issue may often be financial and not even related to the efficacy of a drug. But still, the public will love this. They won't even look at the fact that these drugs being pushed are legally regulated and safety and efficacy tested in large-scale clinical trials. And the only alternative they will see is the alternative medicine that you push. And they won't even care that it has none of these. And these are the people that you want to target, right? They're the ones who are gonna buy what you have to say because you're gonna sell them hope. That's the number one rule of all alternative medicine. You're selling them false hope of better health or false hope that they can save themselves from death.
Everybody believes that aging is irreversible. Now, that's also a misconception because if you remove toxins from your body, if you learn to get the stress out of your life through meditation, if you change your environment, and if you undergo certain procedures like increase antioxidants in your diet, you can actually reverse the biological markers of aging.
But there's a problem with this. You can't be denouncing doctors when you're one yourself. So renounce your doctor title, while of course displaying your ND qualification so people know that you know what you're talking about. But I've also seen people pull off a style of deception where while being a full-time doctor, they peddle a lot of misinformation. Maybe I should do a video on how this can be pulled off. Maybe I will. Subscribe if you don't want to miss it. What was the next reason why he decided not to be a doctor anymore? As you might have learned from the last lesson in this tutorial series, after 1965, the immigration rules in the US were changed. And that was when a lot of godmen and gurus started swarming to the US to sell their brand of spirituality. And so many of these gurus were massively successful. And Chopra saw how much more profitable it was being a guru than being a doctor. He also saw the way some Americans went crazy for a bit of Eastern spirituality in their lives. He knew he had to be a part of this spirituality movement somehow. But how? He couldn't straight up be a guru. He was working as a doctor in the US for over a decade now. He would be called out as a fraud. So that option is off the drawing board. What else could he do? How about something more medicine related? Something that invoked a feeling of spirituality. How about Ayurveda, the ancient Indian system of medicine? It doesn't matter that it remains unupdated for thousands of years despite the new knowledge and new evidence that we have today. It doesn't have good legal regulation or safety or efficacy, as I've explored in multiple videos before. But you should look on the bright side. You're already a doctor and you're Indian, and Ayurveda has tons of elements of spirituality, and you can pull this off really well.
So I went back to my own country, India. I came across a science called Ayurveda, which is 6,000 years old and has its roots in ancient India. Ayurveda, it means science of life. Here's some really ancient wisdom that you can look at through the eyes of modern science.
Any critics of his would be instantly seen as haters of Ayurveda, who are dismissive of an entire culture. People are not going to want to hear what the critics have to say, even if the criticisms are legitimate and evidence-based. You can always just hide behind those defenders of yours, whose numbers will be so huge that they'll be so hard to argue against, even if all they're doing is misrepresenting the critics. Chopra took a slightly smarter route. He kept his options open by promoting not just Ayurveda specifically, but alternative medicine in general. That way, if he needs to, he can go into Ayurveda. He has his Ayurveda friends, but he also has the whole of alternative medicine, which has a lot of spiritual sounding principles and has a larger customer base, all of which he can capitalize with his spiritual sounding messages.
Science is now in a process of overthrowing the climactic overthrow of the superstition of materialism.
Anyone who has read The Art of War by Sun Tzu can tell you that you should always avoid an uphill battle. And Deepak Chopra probably knew this all too well. Why be on the side of public health and actual medicine and fight the uphill battle when you can take the much more easier route and make a lot more money doing it by siding with alternative medicine? One more thing that he did to get more of a footing in this whole alternative medicine and spirituality arena is to actually join a guru's ranks. None other than Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and his transcendental meditation movement. And he soon found himself as the right-hand spokesperson for the Maharishi, for his articulateness and his ability to seemingly make sense while essentially saying nothing.
You know, I've never really run across a definition of consciousness that I understood. So maybe you could teach me something. And
A superposition of possibilities.
Okay, well, I know what each of those words means. I still don't think I know it.
But the Maharishi and him eventually had a falling out, which I'll talk about soon. Okay, so far we've talked about why he gave up being a doctor and cemented himself in the world of alternative medicine, but that was only a start. What did he do to get where he is today? Chopra was really good friends with, guess who? Michael Jackson. And he very cleverly leveraged this friendship to get Michael Jackson to vouch for him and get him on an interview with Oprah Winfrey. And that is when his career really took off.
I decided to invite my first guest on the show after getting a phone call from Michael Jackson. He was calling to let me know that I absolutely had to have Dr. Deepak Chopra on the show. Over the years, I'd heard about Deepak Chopra and had read one of his books, Quantum Healing, and had been fascinated by it.
Oprah herself was into all this spirituality and stuff and had an audience that was super primed for receiving spiritual messages from the likes of Chopra. And so Chopra and Oprah did this interview back in 1993, which cemented Chopra in the public eye, and there was no looking back. As Chopra's career was taking off on one side, his friendship with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi had a falling out. The Maharishi saw that Chopra was getting a lot of limelight. Some say that he was scared that Chopra might replace him as guru, as a leader of the TM movement. And so not only did the Maharishi put an end to any promotion of Chopra by the TM movement, He eventually ousted Chopra from the movement completely. But this was no problem for Chopra, whose career was a rising tide thanks to Oprah. So what should be our takeaway from this whole episode of his life? It's really important to have connections with people who are already famous so you can leverage their fame to market yourself. Most people don't really understand how science works, and some people probably don't even care. To them, science was probably a boring subject you had back in school that you had to get a good grade in if you were to get into a good university, etc. And things like quantum physics and string theory is so confusing, especially because most of it is so mathematical. Unfortunately, the only areas of science that most people are interested in are the frontiers of science, the topics that are always in the news. Things like quantum mechanics and string theory and general relativity. I'm smelling an opportunity here. Like Deepak Chopra, you can easily fill this gap. If you were him back then, you'll see that all these people are looking at the MD after your name and being like, he must know what he's talking about, or he knows the science, and blindly believing every little thing that you say.
It's no sense a product of the brain, and our whole endeavor in spiritual discipline is to actually go beyond that personal consciousness, that ego consciousness, so we can identify with that transcendent reality, which is the source of space, time, energy, and everything else that exists.
Okay.
These are exactly the people you should take advantage of. Start by telling them stuff they already believe. This will put their confirmation bias into overdrive. Like, tell them why modern medicine is bad. None of what you say has to be true. It just has to be aligned with the spiritual audience and their thoughts and their anti-science beliefs. And your expertise as a doctor will help you sprinkle in those sciencey terms and make what you say sound legit. And before you know it, people in their millions will be listening to your talks, reading your books, and watching you on their favorite shows. Now, I'm gonna talk about something that will help you amplify this response. And all it takes is 4 magic words. The words are quantum energy, vibration, and frequency. See, these words mean specific things in science. But like I said, they're not easy to understand ideas. So you can use them however you like and twist language to make them mean anything.
There are quantum leaps of creativity. There's something called the observer effect, where intention orchestrates space-time events, which we then measure as movement and motion and energy and matter.
Use these words repeatedly when you talk.
A sound frequency of 528 hertz, which is understood to be the frequency of love.
With enough practice, you'll soon learn to make them imply anything, like there is no reality.
In deference to Sam Harris, he said, don't go the way of quantum physics. I think I'm going to have to say that science is now in a process of overthrowing the climactic overthrow of the superstition of materialism. That everything that we call matter comes from something that is not material. That the essential nature of the physical world is that it's not physical. That the essential stuff of the universe is non-stuff.
Soon, your fanboys, the people who listen to you, will start using them so much that these words will begin to mean something in the New Age circles. And since these are scientific words, they'll recognize them as something they might have learned in school or something they read in a science article somewhere. But now, after hearing you, they'll have a meaning for it and they'll feel like they understand it. And if you want to learn about this in more detail, I've done a video exclusively on such words. Something you need to develop like Deepak Chopra did is a sort of finesse with the English language that can make anything sound, for lack of a better term, beautiful.
In the absence of a conscious entity, the moon remains a radically ambiguous and ceaselessly flowing quantum soup.
That's right, we're not human beings trying to live out our lives. We are leaves in the stream of creation. See, there's a quirk of the human mind here that you can exploit. When people hear something and it sounds beautiful, often thanks to poetic language, that's something people can instantly appreciate. It's like an artful painting that makes us feel good when we look at it. And because of this good feeling, people often mistake something beautiful for something that makes sense. That's why Deepak Chopra often gets away saying stuff like this.
Rumi, the great Sufi poet, said, "You're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the mighty ocean in the drop."
It's because people nod to his poetic language without scrutinizing what he's saying. It's as if he's backing up his claims with legit evidence without any evidence. Beautiful language doesn't make anything true or valid or real. You need to back up your claim with evidence for anyone to believe it's real. But people don't often realize this, so you can exploit it. And this same language can help you do more, like write a ton of books with these same claims and become a really successful author. There are a few more minor techniques that you can use to be even better at this trade. Let's see what those are. Once you've created a brand like Chopra's, you can deceive people into making you rich. Hold talks where you charge exorbitant amounts while talking about the ill effects of materialism, which is the opposite of spirituality. Provide retreats where the rich can come, give you their money, and feel like they're better after a weekend chanting their auras and vibrations at the right frequencies. For a couple of 100,000 years, humans have existed on this planet, and just when we think, okay, we finally conquered our biases and figured out how evidence can light our path in the dark and show us the way, and that's when Deepak Chopra comes to revert us back to feelings and energy and vibrations and stuff. There will be critics who will say nasty things to you.
I would never be tempted to lecture a room full of 1,000 people at Caltech about physics. I'm not a physicist. You're not a physicist. And basically every sentence demonstrates that you speak on the subject.
But the people who do believe you will give you so much money that you'll never be sad. And even if you are, you'll have enough money to wipe those tears with. I hope you've been taking notes because there are a ton of important lessons that you can learn here. Today, Deepak Chopra is worth almost $150 million thanks to his talks, his books, his stakes in businesses and companies, his retreats, most of them alternative medicine based. I hope this lesson was very useful to you if you are looking to get into this business. Always remember, if you like this sort of content, you can support me through these options. I'm also trying to grow a generous community of supporters who can donate me super bikes so I can ride off into the sunset like Sadhguru. These are all the wonderful people who've already taken a step in that right direction. If you like this video, be sure to watch all the videos in the series. You can start with this video on what buzzwords you can use to sell your pseudoscience. I'll see you in the next lesson. Till then, remember, science is dope.